Hello, everybody. It's Dr. Boz here. Welcome to the show. We've got a great show for you tonight. Yesterday, I had one of the biggest interviews that I've had since launching my YouTube channel. That Stephen Bartlett from Diary of a CEO starred me on his channel and asked me some of my favorite questions about how is it that we use a ketogenic diet to improve brains. But about an hour and a half into that show, he also asked me a question that I haven't ever talked about on this channel. He asked me about my history of 12 felonies, 24 years in prison, and my medical license. And if you haven't watched the show, it is a story that I'm not afraid to tell, but I don't want it distracting from the work that I do. So I haven't talked about it here. The 900,000 people that have watched the episode, I don't know how many of them made it to that part of the conversation. But for the first time, I'm going to talk about this topic that I've not talked about on this channel and share how I used this pain to drive what it is I do on this channel. Welcome to the Dr. Boz Show. I am here fasted. I have a ketone of 3.5, glucose of 79. If you are one of the new viewers to our channel, maybe as a result of that amazing interview, welcome. That's a tradition we do here on the show, that if you're checking in live, post your numbers if you're fasting with me this week. When you've got a big holiday coming up, that's not an uncommon thing for me to do is fast, but I especially will do it on the week of a holiday, preparing for a rather larger meal on Thanksgiving. I am excited to do this show tonight, and also very nervous. So I'm also a woman of faith. You might want to say a little prayer for getting through this, and hopefully communicating what it is that I want you as an audience to see my work, to be able to learn from what I teach and not be distracted by a history that you'll learn about tonight. All right, we're gonna start right away here. For those that are watching, keep in mind I will answer questions at the end of this. I am excited about doing one and done, doing this topic and then having it on YouTube that folks can dial back and look at, and then not distract from the work that we have ahead of us over the next year. We're going to get started with some of a different style of notes that I'm using because I prepared this over the course of the last 24 hours when I saw, I think it's time to have this conversation. And the first section of this episode is, I'm going to show you a story about how I used my pain. And I'm going to tell part of this story that you can Google me, but you also could watch Diary of a CEO for a pretty succinct explanation of where did these 12 felonies come from. But I will say with a 100% confidence that I would not be here teaching you if it wasn't for those 12 felonies. That in that Diary of a CEO, you will see that or you heard probably this story that I was taking care of patients. I was serving those in my community. They are underserved in the state of South Dakota, and most of them had brown skin. They were malnourished. They had iron deficiency. And in that service work, I got accused of Medicaid fraud. There was no wrongdoing found. That wasn't I was paying for the IV iron in these kids when Medicaid wouldn't pay for it. And the investigation led to a spiteful relationship on the person accusing me. The person who's very powerful in that state. And that story ends with a headline in the newspaper that says, "The doctor who serves the homeless is now homeless herself." And I thought about showing you some of the pictures of the RV that my family and I stayed in this part of the story. And again, you can find those in all kinds of places. It was in the newspaper. It was all over Facebook. That story, for 3 years running, they do this thing at the end of the year that what is the most popular story of the past year? And this story you're about to hear was the #1 story in the state of South Dakota for 3 years running by like tenfold. Because in the midst of all that, I ran for the United States Senate. And it was in a season where a young business owner, who's also a medical doctor, had something to say about how medicine was being done and what happens when you are not a politician, you're not a political science major, you are a citizen who says, you're about to change the rules of medicine. I'm going to lean in and do my part. And I ran for the United States Senate. And my husband was the first to point out we're in trouble when the quarterly earnings came back. The opponent, who, spoiler alert, won the United States Senate role there, where his fundraising for that quarterly report was $740,000 for that 3-month period. And in the rules, you have to show the donors to the government, and there were his, 70 donors of $10,000 a pop. And my quarterly earnings outraised him by about $30,000. Yet where did the money come from was empty, because the average size of the donation from the people who were supporting me was $45. And you don't have to tell the government where it came from if it was a donation under $200. So there was nobody on the list, and I outraised him. In other words, I had a grassroots supporting me, saying, yes, Obamacare is about to hit. I'm outside corporate medicine. I was running my own clinic, and I was fighting some things that I think were wrong in medicine. And what happens over that time, again, you can go listen to the Diary of a CEO. I did a pretty good job of summarizing it without getting tearful. I am not proud. I mean, I'm notable for being the first person in the history of the United States of America to ever be accused of, let alone tried for submitting petitions where I was charged with perjury and filing of false documents for 6 of the petitions. Despite having extra petitions, are where you pass it around. If you've ever been at a game saying, would you sign this petition? We want to get on the ballot. Would you sign this petition? I want to run for office. And the rules are you verbally ask them if they are of your party, and then you ask them to sign their name or print their name and sign their name. And I did that. And I did that for the number I needed plus some. But I left a petition at my clinic, and supporters came and signed it while I was at the Philippines. And so the date that I was supposed to witness their signature, I was in the Philippines. That's a signature of my sister, of my preacher, of patients I knew. But I was accused of perjury and of the filing of false documents for 12 felonies. And when that accusation came about, this happened. I got accused of 12 felonies. I was fired by the School of Medicine. It scared the tar out of patients. Patients went running. Colleagues went running. Many people in my family were embarrassed. I had lots of politicians saying, who do you think you were to run for that? And my poor children did not know how to put together that the woman who's been doing acts of service and mission work, it was now this front line above the fold newspaper article of a 12-time felon. And that trial happened in a small town in South Dakota called Pierre. That's the capital of South Dakota, where there's 10,000 people. That's not where I live, but that's where the trial happened. And it was live streamed. And on a live stream, I was convicted of 24 felonies and sentenced to 24 years in prison. It's a moment. Yeah, it's a moment. A lot of pain happening there. And it was, by the grace of God, the judge probated that for 500 hours of community service. As long as I was seeing the poorest patients in the state. And in the meantime, I appealed to the Supreme Court. At this stage of the story, all of that was done pro se, because no lawyer wanted to stand next to me to say, You're fighting one of the biggest demons that we know about. That when I look at that story and I think, okay, yeah, those 12 felonies did something. Okay, they changed the course of my life. There's a lot of pain in that story. It doesn't get easier in the next couple of chapters, but there is one person in the story who was very heroic, and that is my husband, who saw what happened and stood next to us and said his role was to help me reframe it, help me say, it felt very much like a victim, like, this is so unfair. This is so unjust. This can't happen in America. I have 12 felonies. I've been accused. I'm 12 felonies. And he used a very famous scripture, Exodus chapter 4, where it says, God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies those he calls. And he stood right next to me as the world said, he actually did one of the most amazing things, and that is nobody would run against the guy that was persecuting me. He was super powerful. And my husband, who is not a lawyer, who doesn't have a college degree, he resurrected the Libertarian Party in the state of South Dakota and ran against the man who was persecuting me, because no one else would run against him. Yeah. That during that time, though, it's not hard for people to imagine, but it's easy for me to share that life changed a lot, and I suddenly was no longer a busy I was a practicing physician. I was able to keep my medical license because the judge had sentenced me to use my medical license and serve the poorest people in our state. If you get convicted of a felony, I don't know a medical board that would let you keep your license. This is the first miracle in this story. There's many, but the first one I'm going to talk about here is you get 12 felonies, you should have your medical license reviewed. It's just what happens. But the judge sentenced me to use my license, and he'd heard about all this mission work that I'd done and said, go serve the poorest people in our state. And I kind of snickered because I said I was already working there, but yes, sir, I will go do that. And I start working on 500 hours of community service to the Oglala Lakota tribe in Pine Ridge, South Dakota, Pine Ridge Reservation. And during that time, life slowed down. I got to lean in to do some things that I probably wouldn't have been able to do with a busy practice. And I learned about a ketogenic diet. My practice at the point had been peak brain performance. How do we get brains to work better? And I learned about a ketogenic diet thinking it sounds a little crazy. And at this point, I don't have any of the social capital to talk about it, but I have time to study it. And as many of you know, I wrote a book during this time because during that time of 12 felonies, I wasn't busy seeing 30 patients a day. I could take care of my very sick mother, who I didn't know at the time had a cancer I knew she had a cancer, but I didn't know her cancer was insulin-based. It was very stimulated by insulin production. And I had no idea how to teach her how to do a ketogenic diet. I didn't know how to be a ketone at that point. But during this next section, let me go to here. There's the book Any Way You Can. You'll see it on the shelf back here. I wrote this book, and it was not what I planned on doing. I was not going to write a book. I don't like to sit still that well, but I had the time. And her success, I mean, what I did for my mother, it saved my mom, and it saved me. I got to spend time studying in a way that I hadn't had in years, running a practice, teaching for the med school, the previous couple of years running for a political office, left very little time to fill up my curiosity. And as I said, many of the patients that had previously been flocking into my clinic were now appropriately scared to death to see a 12-time felon. And I was serving out that time in Pine Ridge. Let me just change this. Hold on here. Serving out that time in Pine Ridge by giving 2 weeks spent at my clinic and 1 week spent in Pine Ridge. So Pine Ridge is 6 hours away from where I live. But that gave me a little bit of time to not only listen to some podcasts, listen to some audiobooks as I'm driving across the state of South Dakota, but I would work a 12-hour shift in the jail. I rented a couch from the local coffee shop because there's not a hotel room in Pine Ridge. And I wasn't going to commute back home. I was going to stay there for a week, serve out some of those community service hours, looking to acquire 500 service hours before I could, while we were appealing to the Supreme Court that to see if we could get these felonies to go away. But what happened was that, yeah, my mom's success returned life into her, but it also started to fill up a part of me that was very curious. I got to quietly apply a ketogenic diet to my brain patients, the patients who I couldn't help them any further. This is all happening in about 2015. That time to study and look at why does this silly ketogenic diet work? And then I got to find some other people that were really instrumental in me learning. Dom D'Agostino is one of them. Eric Westman is another one. There was a podcast funded by somebody, but the two keto dudes did it, and they were very entertaining, but also real live stories that I was seeing in my patients. I was hearing from these two men. And I got to dive deep. I got to learn the ketogenic diet in a way that in 2015, that had I been seeing all those patients, the ones that the 12 felonies had scared away, I would have never been able to be as proficient and really crack at least my understanding of a ketogenic diet. So yeah, lots of time on my hands, patients who were willing to see me. One of those was my mother. Yes, my mother was not one of the people ashamed of me. She was very proud of what I stood up for, and she saw the insides baseball of what it looks like to live through something that's not fair. But it also gave me time to go to every one of her appointments and reminded me why I had an independent clinic, why I did not want to go back to corporate medicine. That was they wouldn't have hired me at this point anyway, but so I'm going to stay in my clinic. But from 2013 to 2015, I'm running for U.S. Senate and then taking care of my mom. I'm not allowed to teach med students anymore, but I can still teach patients. And then from 2016 to 2017, I wrote a book. I lost a bet to my husband. My husband would see me putting sticky notes on the mirror of our bathroom. And when my mom would get the concept, I would move the sticky note to the other side of the mirror. And he kept telling me, you should write a book about that. And I did. And the book has sold over 1 million copies. The book is, if you're new to this channel, it is it's on audiobook. I specifically did that because my mom couldn't have read a book. She's a smart woman, but her brain was not working right when that cancer was replicating and firing and taking over her soul. But she could listen, and she could re-listen. So if you are new to the channel and you're looking for the easiest first step, that audiobook it's a gift from God. I don't know how I wrote such a great book. I do know it was divine. And it told a love story about a mom and a daughter. The mom had cancer, and the daughter said, "Let me help you, Mom." So if you think a ketogenic diet is just for weight loss, I highly recommend step 1, listen to that book. I do share a couple of things that to me are funny. And if you've listened to the book, knowing what is going on one of the hardest parts was that I now had this mental space to think about something I wouldn't have spent time on. I would have totally blown off and said, this sounds like junk science. Why would you want to be in ketoacidosis? And here I am trying to find other people to talk to, because that crazy doctor with 12 felonies who ran for US Senate is saying the word ketosis. So I certainly was not saying it very loud in 2015. I couldn't deny what was happening to my mom and what was happening to my patients. I specifically love talking about her oncologist, and this will be the first time I've told this story. He was the head of the medical school. So he saw the moment that I got charged with 12 felonies, and I'm telling people that's not justified, it's not justified, but without due process, I was removed from the medical school, like a lot of things. I mean, it was just, everybody was so fearful. And he would never be caught dead talking to me outside of an exam room that my mother was in. And if there was one person that should look at what you're doing and watch firsthand that something amazing was happening to my mom, let it be the head of the medical school, one of my friends. I highly respected him. I taught with him. We taught medical students together. But if you recall the scene where she's going into the oncologist and I don't know what to tell this guy, and I'm super nervous because now you know that, yeah, I've been all over the newspaper. I don't want to say anything crazy. I don't want to hurt my mom. I can't believe how healthy she looks in 6 weeks of a ketogenic diet. But I'm a 12-time felon, and I'm not going to say the ketogenic diet out loud to this oncologist without like losing even more credibility. When I look at the beauty behind what's going on in that scene, though, in that time, is that I was learning how to embrace the weird science, be the one who can be at peace with being an outsider. That I became very comfortable with realizing that God designed me a little different, and just like I said earlier, He had tested me. I can remember what my husband saying a couple of very powerful things where he's like, you like tests. Just rock this one. It's a test. How strong can you stand and know your faith and know what you're doing? And you might not get recognition this side of heaven. It might not happen, but it's a test. Can you just be confident and at peace with what's happening to you? Oh, thank God he said those words. And he said them many times. And what happened over that period of time was powerful. Like I really learned that you should take a time where your pain, I want to show you this as I walk through this. I want you to use your pain. And I know that it took 12 felonies to start this story. I'm not sure God could have got my attention with something much less. That as I am doing something that is super near and dear to my heart, which is I went into medicine to help to answer the questions of my parents. That was the most fun part, was being able to have the things they could answer, farming questions. They could answer, things about running a farm, and I could answer these questions they didn't have answers to. It was so rewarding to be invited into medicine, only to be excommunicated during this season where, but God gave me the one gift that He knew would keep me going, that I'm going to teach you something that's going to heal your mom. That book, Any Way You Can, it is a beautiful story. I don't know how I did that. And 1 million people have read it. In fact, if you've read it and you haven't left a review, it's self-published. So please leave a review so that people know it's not just me saying that. And I got better at teaching this. Because the first time I taught it, it was not very good. I mean, I taught my mom and I had to shoot cleanup a few times, like, let me try again, Mom. Let me try to say that again. So there's a few things that I think I could have done better. I mean, I talk about patients that go ass over apricot into the ketogenic diet and they come in and they just kind of crash. And I compare it to the patients in my addiction clinic who would have their third DUI, you're, going to be sent to prison if they don't do everything the judge says. So they come in with all the wrong motivations and have no idea how they're going to white knuckle not living with alcohol for the rest of their life. And when patients come in crisis and they just do, I'm just going to do on that ketogenic diet, that's exactly kind of the mistakes Mom and I were making at the beginning because we were scared. She had cancer, and I know that we stumbled quite a bit. If I could change what I was teaching them, what I would teach now, I would start with these three. So the three things that I wish I had done better. If you walk into the ketogenic, if you're from the Diary of a CEO and this is the first time you've landed on my page, I'm so happy to welcome you onto our page. But there's three things that if you're either new to the ketogenic diet or like many people on this page, they need a reset for the ketogenic diet. They need a reset. The first thing is before you start doing anything, especially in the week of Thanksgiving, do not cut your carbs today. I need you to track. I teach you how to do this in several of the books. There's a chronometer app that does it, but 3 days of watching how many carbs you actually are eating right now is a huge way for you to measure how hard is this going to be for you. What most people don't realize when they come into this is how many places there are carbs. I think people know it better now, but I was terrible at expecting, being able to see who's going to have the toughest time. So I don't care if you're new or if you're pushing reset, before you push go, before you ass over apricot, 3 days of tracking. See how many carbs you're actually eating before you begin. It changes the way the next few steps go. The next thing I like to talk about is cupboard therapy. You have to empty the cupboard of carbs. You have to reset the fridge that you don't have carbohydrates near you as you're doing this. It is just like asking an alcoholic to work at the bar when you're first coming off of carbohydrates. And I am telling you, don't look at the end of the book, just look at this step. Clean out the carbohydrates from your life. The first few days are much better when the temptation is further away from you. And the final part that I do a much better job of now than I did at the beginning was the why. You heard me talk about this if you watch the Diary of a CEO, that I have some amazing stories. One of them is Jane that I talk about on the Diary of a CEO. And she did her why 4 times before she really landed on an honest why. She wasn't lying. She just couldn't pull away those onion layers until she did this process for the 4th time. And my mom's why at the time was cancer. And I needed to serve somebody with my whole heart. And I had patience, but boy, none of them met what my mother did. So whether it's the first time you're doing this or if you're pushing the redo button, look carefully at your why. Look carefully at how much that is an honest assessment of how you're doing and how you're learning. When people get into that second, third week and they're feeling better, the why is not that important. It's when they stall. It's when they go to Thanksgiving dinner coming up in a couple of days and they're like, oh, why am I doing this? And if they truly haven't unpacked that, they'll binge. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not going to have a good hearty meal on Thanksgiving, but the pathology that I used to have around food and the pathology that I have today is just very minimal. And it's because my why is very real. It's something we unpack when I walk through the workbook with people, when I walk through the 21 day. Let me hop over to one of the things that I think is the hardest part of teaching people is how do I meet you where you need to be? And that teaching process is a lot better than what it was in the past. And before we get to what happened to the 12 felonies and what happened to my medical license, I want to just make sure that if you're here for the first time, please know that this is BozMD.com. If I go here, oopsie, I want to do there. Oops, that's not going to do that. We're going to use this one. BozMD.com, this is the website. And if you look at today, one of the easiest ways I just talked about a minute ago was, if you want to listen to an audiobook, that's a great way to begin. But this online course is the most condensed, organized sequence of videos that I'll tell you, most people with a foggy brain do not like to read. They need some very specific guidance. I did this video course specifically with patients with brain fog in mind, or people who just say, I just need the quick, easy way to begin. And then I don't let you skip ahead. I want you to do this one and then go to the next one, because people get really overwhelmed when they first lean into this. And I am here to say that the stuff I talked about on Diary of a CEO, the stuff about cleaning up your brain, taking out the trash in your brain so you don't have the brain injuries and the brain issues like Parkinson's, like Alzheimer's, like other memory problems that are taking over a generation. You got to start with the basics and not look at the end. You got to step one. So I do a good job of going through that. I do like to point out that, there's that book. Here's Diary of Consistently Keto. There's the other book. And we do have a tradition before I go into the last section, which is going to tell you about my, what happened to the development? What happened? What's the story? The part that's I've never said out loud. I'm going to click on this right here, which is, I think it's going to work, is the courses. Every year in the month of December, I do a course that I have on my website. There is a promo code that's going to be here. You can use it today, but it's especially for Black Friday. And that is, the course is usually $2,500. That's a lot of money. And we were taking $1,000 off for Black Friday. And for some reason, I can't get that page to open. I'm sorry. What you should know about the brains course is I do a brain assessment. And the curriculum for that brains course was written when I was serving those patients in Pine Ridge Reservation. That, there was a whole bunch of the world that was scared of me. Again, it doesn't, just because they're underserved doesn't make them willing to see me. And so the tribe had to vote on whether or not I could write a prescription or check their labs. And while they were squabbling over that, I said, I can teach them. I'm really good at teaching about brains. And I just remember it's a moment where I know that I was called to do this. I was called to teach about this. I was called to make the information simple and truthful, but simple enough for beginners to learn and then to build upon. And I had so much fun writing this curriculum that during the story I'm about to tell you, the Department of Defense hired this 12-time felon to teach soldiers and other military in the National Guard how to heal a brain that was injured. And I was so thankful for somebody to trust me, to ask me to do what God designed me to do. Again, no guarantee this side of heaven that that's going to happen. And I was given this opportunity to go teach something that I had curated the content in a place where, boy, if you ever met a bunch of people that needed to hear it, it was in Pine Ridge. And then to expand that to other places in South Dakota and then other places across the country and for the National Guard, all while the story I'm about to tell you was going on. So I put it in an online course. It's usually one of the most expensive courses because I don't want a casual viewer to see it. You'll see why when you get inside. It just has some things that I don't need the crazies in there. If you want to heal a brain, this is how you heal it. And what I do every year in the week of my birthday, which is usually Thanksgiving week, is I rewatch the course. And then I have 4 live sessions in the month of December where anybody who's bought the course in the past year, I review their brain assessment in front of the class. I mean, anybody who's bought it, it comes into the class and you get to see that assessment of what did I learn about their brain. I love it. It's a place where I don't know that I'll ever get back to the level of brain injured patients the way I was in South Dakota. But teaching about it is one of my favorite things. My kids all had to watch it. There's a bunch of stories in there about raising kids and how do you get brains to get out of addiction and what do you show them with marijuana? What did I do? My kids are, praise God, not users of marijuana. And how did I do that? It's a great story. But again, not for the casual viewer. The sale goes on once a year. Anybody who's bought the Brains course throughout the year gets to come to those Friday classes or those December classes. And I do 4 live sessions. And it's great. It's fun. It's how I remind myself of the behaviors where I want to keep my brain clean. And it's not just with a ketogenic diet. But let's go to the final part of this. Deep breath. All right. So yeah, here we are. There is 12 felonies and a medical license. Again, the first person to ask about this was Diary of a CEO. They actually asked me before. They've asked me to be on the show. I'm super excited. What an opportunity. And the 12 felonies, they're not in a background check. The 12 felonies are gone. I'm going to show you how that story unfolds, but because it's messy, it's kind of painful for me to talk about. Actually, as I was reviewing the notes, the reason these slides are not typed up is because it kind of got lost in the story. It was a long story. And I'm telling this once, so I'm going to put the timeline out there for you. And I knew when they were asking the questions that there's a good chance they don't want that kind of history on their show. So I got to tell the story to them. And again, they told it in a pretty succinct way, which helps me to say, all right, let's just do this one and done and tell what happened next. So I'll just begin by just looking at the camera and telling you this. So yeah, the 2014 is when I got arrested for the accusation. 2015 is when the trial happened. It was not in my hometown. It was 4.5 hours away in a town of 10,000 people, where most of the people that live in the state capital are politicians. And 12 peers found me guilty, and the judge sentenced me to 24 years in prison. He then says he'll probate that with the highest number of service hours ever awarded in the state of South Dakota, which was 500 hours. It takes me many more hours of service to be able to get those done, but I was successful in signing off all of my community service hours because he specifically said, I want you to serve the patients in our state that are underserved, just like you did for those people in Haiti and just like you did for the people in the Philippines. And the Philippines is where I was serving when the petitions got signed that clearly showed I couldn't have witnessed them. So February of 2017, I've got all my service hours done. And what happens, here, I'll show you this so it makes a little more sense here. In July of 2017, the Supreme Court, so we appealed to the Supreme Court. And this is again, I'll tell the story because I'm not going to say it again. There's a lot of these things I had to do pro se, which means I had to represent myself, especially in front of the medical board. Like no lawyer wanted to stand next to me. Appealing to the Supreme Court, like they were like, there's no way. We even asked the judge, would you consider if you have your first crime, there's a chance that you can do the service work and get a suspended imposition, meaning they'll erase the felonies. And the judge is like, this is too many felonies. There's no way she's going to get a suspended imposition. There's no way these will ever be removed. And so my only prayer was to get all 12 felonies to be removed by the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court did say that essentially there was abuse of power, that those perjury crimes were not real perjury, and they got erased. But the filing of the 6 documents stayed as felonies. So now I have 6 felonies, not 12, but who cares? 1 felony is all it takes to get rid of your medical license. And a few months later, in October, I found a lawyer willing to stand next to me in front of Judge Brown again to say, I know you said no to the suspended imposition. I prayed and God clearly said, ask again. Do you know how many lawyers I went through saying, God told me to ask again? They're like, get out of here, lady. I'm not coming near you. Your story is crazy. And I found a lawyer who went in front of in front of the judge. And this is one of the second miracles of the story, where we're driving to Pierce, South Dakota. It's my husband and I. Mark Batterson, I don't know if you know who he is, but he had written a children's book about being a circle maker. And if you're struggling with something and you're wrestling with God, to walk circles around what you're praying for. And you never know how long it's going to take, but that circle prayers, so circle maker is what it's called, and it's biblical, and it's got a great story that I didn't know in the Bible. And I remember reading it when I was talking about my campaign, but I was specific when we're going back to the judge who's already told us no, to say, no, you cannot have a suspended imposition. You cannot erase these felonies. That's not a thing. You've got 6 of them. The law says that you can only do it for 1. And the drive from Sioux Falls to Pierre is a good 4 hours. My husband and I did it in silence. We don't speak a word. We're both super nervous. And then he gets to the courthouse and he drives around the courthouse. And he prayed out loud. God, remove these. You have the power. Remove these felonies. And I walk into the courtroom, and this lawyer who's helping me is very nervous. Like, I'm thinking, I should be pro se. You make me nervous just looking at you. How are you going to present this to the judge in a way that's calm? And God took over, and it was great. He did his job. And the judge asked me a couple questions. I answered them honestly. I said I would never have wanted to cause harm to any of the people of South Dakota. And the expense that's been spent on me is heartbreaking on how much money they've spent persecuting me. That was not my intention. I'm sorry the mistake happened under my watch. I served out my time. And the judge says, in all of my years, I have never seen somebody have this many letters sent to me. And by the grace of God, he gave me a suspended imposition for the first time in South Dakota ever, that all 6 felonies were removed. It was a miracle. So here I am, 6 felonies gone by the Supreme Court. Now the judge has reversed, suspended the other 6 felonies. And on a few months, or a few days, the order was sealed. And on November 17th, they signed it into law. I mean, you can find these dates in there. I was just looking these up earlier. But in April of 2018, so again, this story starts in 2013. I'm homeless in 2012, fighting the Medicaid fraud. I'm running for the United States Senate by 2013 and 2014. We're now in April of 2018. I've got a cool gig with the Department of Defense about this time, or somewhere in that time, and I'm really good at a ketogenic diet because I've had the ability to slow way down and see the patients for as long as I need to. And Judge Hoffman orders a retrial in front of the medical board. The medical board had already said, take away her license. And he said, I think you need a retrial. When they said that, they didn't know that all these felonies were going to be gone, that the Supreme Court was going to do that. And it then takes another year for the retrial to happen. And on February 19th, the judge rules that no adverse action should come against Dr. Bosworth. And now that sentence right there gets sent to the medical board. During this whole time, I mean, this is the part where when people say, do you have a medical license? I'm like, yes, I do. Has it ever been revoked? No, it has not. That is a miracle. I mean, the number of times that I had to go in front of the medical board, pro se, nobody else would stand next to me. And I don't blame them. It was pretty scary. And here I am in February of 2019, and the judge we had to have a retrial because of just a long, long story. And I keep thinking about what Chad said. It's a test. You're good at tests. You like tests. You can do this. Again, reframing what the pain meant to me. And it was the final ruling from the medical board did not come until December of 2019. And the medical board followed the advice of that judge and said, there was request from the state to say, this is a very cool part. I forgot all these things. That the state of South Dakota had asked for the medical board to revoke my medical license, and they denied that. They said, get her to leave the state of South Dakota. They denied that, said she can live wherever she wants. And then they said, get her to get get a psychological evaluation. They said, we don't need a psychological evaluation on her. It was in December of 2019 that I picked 3 states outside of the state of South Dakota because I was finally free and I was done with South Dakota. They're my people. They're my Grandma Rose's. And I said, done. In fact, my husband says, the Attorney General's running for office again. The kids and I are leaving. Are you coming with us? And we had acceptance into those three states, which I let my husband say, Chad, just pick the states. It's going to be a long process to get accepted into another state with all of this history. And if nothing else, it was painful to talk about. But in the end, Florida won. Tampa, Florida. I'm never moving again. And I know that there are great things ahead for my channel. I know that God has got me in the place where I really am thankful for what his gift to me has been. And that is to teach in a way that you guys can understand. I really praise God that you're here listening. I forgot to tell you one thing, though. My assistant just put this into. She says, what is the discount code for the Brains course? And it is, I wonder if I can write on here. Yeah, I'm going to put Brains 2025. I think you can write it both ways. Brains 2025. Yeah, either way, that's how you get the $1,000 off of that course. Either all of you have left or they didn't leave me any more questions and I've scared everybody away. So maybe that's just the place we're supposed to end. Like I said, I want to use the platform that not only God has gifted me, but this recent interview on Diary of a CEO to teach people, to teach you. I hope that you come to this channel with the desire to be free of shackles, and that my story of pain, it shaped me. And it's let the pain of what your disease has done be the reason you can shape you. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. We'll see you next week with a fresh lesson.